What names and logos are just names and logos. What your brand is something different.
Yeah.
Your brand, ultimately, I believe, it's the promise that you're making.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to Framework Leadership, a podcast about principles and ideas you can use today to take your leadership to the next level. I'm your host, Kent Ingle, president of Southeastern University.
And I'm your co-host, Michael Steiner, vice president for innovation.
And we are excited today to introduce our guest for today's show, Erik Christianson. He's a nationally recognized, award-winning strategic communications leader. Erik also serves as the executive director of College Sports Communicators, the international organization of athletic communications, sports creatives, and media relations professionals throughout all levels of collegiate athletics in the United States and Canada. Erik, what a privilege to have you with us today.
Ken, Michael, it's a real privilege for me to be here as well. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, I want to get the conversation started on talking about the landscape of college athletics right now. Tell us a little bit about what's been changing, especially over the last 2, 3, 4 years, and where you see the future of college athletics going.
Yeah, it's a really dynamic space if you're paying any attention to college sports at all right now. And I think that college sports is played at all levels in the U.S. and Canada. And I think that with all of the discussions about transfer portals and name, image, and likeness,
right.
and at the highest levels, the revenue is very high. I think it's one fundamental question that everyone keeps coming back to is, what is the status of a student athlete in relation to their campus? Are they a student or are they an employee? And I think that is the main issue, and that's what across the board, what leaders in college sports are working. I worked on that for a long time. I was at the NCAA for almost 20 years. And it's as I mentioned, it's a dynamic space.
Sure.
The solutions are not easy ones,
right.
and so that is something that's really driving that conversation. And what is that going to look like? And one of the interesting elements of that then is that we're talking about a fairly small number of schools, 50 to 60, maybe 100 at the top level, that are the highest profile, that are on television every Saturday.
Right.
They're playing during March Madness, right? But then you have everyone else, right? And so it's kind of like the campaign I used to work on when I was at the NCAA. There's 500,000 student athletes. Most are going to go pro in something other than sports. And so I'm really hopeful that as decisions get made, as solutions start to be contemplated, that is kept in mind as well. And then I would say the other one, and this is squarely in our space as well, when we think about then communications and the importance of it then to college athletics and to higher education, I can hardly think of another area within that framework that has changed more, going from the old trifold brochures and web pages to now digital and social media and creative.
Right.
That space is fast changing, and it's continuing to change. That's part of the reason that I was recruited for this role. It's driven a lot of change in our organization, why we rebranded. And so we're really keeping our eye on the ball in terms of what does that change look like? How can we help provide solutions then for our members and for college sports and higher education?
Yeah, and we have a lot of parents listen to this podcast, and they've got students come through Southeastern University, but then across the board. What are some advice you would give to these families, to these young athletes as they're navigating this fear? What questions do they need to be asking? How do they need to be thinking about to manage this critical part of their student athlete's life?
Fit is so important. Whether you're considering athletics or maybe you're not going to be an athlete in college. And my youngest son is a junior in high school, and he's a pretty good athlete, and he's starting to be recruited. Yeah. So I'm right there personally. I used to tell people this a long time, and now I'm living it out. You really have to find that place that's that right fit. Yeah. And the athletics piece and the academics piece, because they're not mutually exclusive. That's the beauty of it in terms of American higher education and athletics that is built into it. When I was at the NCAA, repeatedly we hosted delegations from countries around the world, and they would come to Indianapolis to the national office and say, how do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you build athletics into an academic environment? And Ben, again, back to that main question, that's one of those things that people are really questioning today, and I hope really continues to be the main thing. How does athletics happen within that academic environment? So that's what I encourage my friends and other parents and even students to be thinking about. it has to be the right fit
Right.
for you, whatever
Absolutely.
that might be.
Yeah.
And it might be a wonderful institution like Southeastern, right?
Right.
Or it might be a different one. But find that place that is ultimately that right fit.
Yeah, so good. Through your previous experiences, you provided a lot of strategic leadership and oversaw a lot of media relations and crisis management. What are some of the lessons you've learned throughout your experience in leading that way?
I would say the biggest that comes back to me every time is really thinking about what are you trying to accomplish? Are you in a reactive posture or a proactive one?
Right.
And the way that I like to frame this now, particularly when we're still trying to lead in this way with our organization, are you focused on output or outcome? And the difference there is outcome is you're thinking about what do you want to influence?
Right.
Are you trying to help people better understand your institution? Are you trying to persuade your donors to consider a larger gift? Are you trying to persuade those parents to send that child to your college? Whatever that might be. Output then is more of we're going to focus on how many things are we posting online?
Yeah.
How many infographics did we have on social media? And not tying that back to the main issues in your brand. And so really when I think about that and the course of a long career now is really thinking about and really pushing organizations and leaders to say, are you really leaning into outcome? Because it's really easy then to just focus on output and, look how many posts we had today, or how many videos or how many podcasts we had.
Right.
It's like, but did you reach the audience you wanted to reach? Did you achieve the result you were seeking in that way? And does it ultimately map back to your brand?
Love it.
That's good.
Love it, love it. And you just mentioned a second ago that part of your work you led a rebranding effort, right? And the kind of the work that you're doing. Tell us about what does that process look like? I mean, what did it take to lead through that change, not just internally, but also through all the kind of the changes that's happening macroeconomics level?
It was really interesting for me because I was still on staff at the NCA and of course an important stakeholder with our organization and a sponsor at that time. And I was on a national strategic branding working group. And so I'd say that's the first part is you have to be collaborative in that way and bringing people with a variety of perspectives. Then I had the great opportunity to move into this role as executive director and kind of help finish that process. And I think the biggest thing and where we were really able to be successful was moving beyond just thinking about a new name and a new logo. Because what names and logos are just names and logos. What your brand is something different. Your brand, ultimately, I believe, it's the promise that you're making to all of your stakeholders. And that was something that really was the game changer for us. Once we started looking at, okay, what is that promise that we're making? We're moving beyond what had been a very traditional and successful organization for a long time, focused on the term that is sometimes used of sports information. Well, back to the earlier part of our conversation, communications has entirely changed.
Right.
And so, yes, there's sports information, but there's media relations, and there's strategic, and there's creative, and there's digital. And the reason we're all sitting here today is a great example of that. And so that was really that pivot point for us where we moved from just thinking about doing something because we think we should to something that we've really now been communicating for an effect.
Yeah, no, that's good. In the last few years, you've had a lot of experience leading remotely. And you've obviously, you're based in Indianapolis, but you have staff members spread all throughout the country. How have you kept a successful and crucial team in those kind of conditions remotely? What have been some of the challenges you faced and how have you overcome them?
We're a fully remote organization, which is great. I think most of the time there are challenges. I think we have to be open about that and honest about that. So we have staff in virtually every time zone now of the country. And so, and we'd always been a fully remote organization. So in many ways, I inherited a staff that had more experience than me even. And so I think as a leader, then what you have to do is you have to lean into that and really start to figure out what are the ways that your staff have found to be successful? What might you need to change in order to do that? And then also to set those expectations for what that looks like from a leadership perspective as well. So clearly we have lots of Zoom calls. We use a lot of the appropriate technology to stay connected. And I think it's an iterative process, right? It's not something that is just you put it out on a sheet and it works. Instead, you really look at how that is best achieved. And let me give you one example of that where we were coming up on our national convention. We run that every year. It's a big part of our work. We're bringing almost 1,000 people together, thinking about how we can do our work better. And we were working on a lot of our kind of marketing activations, and we were trying to do that remotely. And I just admittedly was having a hard time wrapping my head around it. So I finally reached out to my director of communications and brand strategy, and I said, I think there are times when sometimes you just have to sit across the table and make these kinds of decisions. And so we did. I got on an airplane. I went to Colorado, and in a day we got it all done. And so what I would suggest then to those who are in that space or thinking about being in is pick your spots. There are times when you need to get together in person, even if you're fully remote.
Yeah, and speaking of that, how do you create that camaraderie, that synergy when you're isolated a little bit and on your own? You kind of miss that dynamic. So how do you really keep that fresh and alive and real?
Right, exactly. I think the first part is to be really clear about your mission.
Okay.
And make sure that everyone is bought in, understands where you're going. So driving change can be a little bit difficult regardless of what environment you're in. So to be really clear on your mission, develop those tools where you have those regular touch points. And I believe as a leader that you have to be sensitive to how one person might want that type of interaction versus another.
Sure.
Down to, is it a Zoom call or a phone call?
Yeah.
Right. Is it a Slack message or email? Is it a text or something different? And then what we try to do then is look for those strategic opportunities where we can connect in person. At our national convention, we bring our executive board and our staff to the NCAA convention each year, something I helped initiate when I was still on staff there. So we look for those strategic opportunities. I brought the team to Indianapolis last year for a couple days of strategic planning. And so using your resources in that way, I think is really wise. It's a good use of resources. It's not extra work, it's part of the work.
Yeah, I mean, since the pandemic, the question has been, is remote work the future, right? Are we all going to be just remote distributed? I think we're seeing across the board the recoil, right? The reaction to that. What do you think? Where do you think this is going to go? I mean, obviously you guys are a remote first company, so it was embedded to you from the beginning. But for these companies that had to make a pivot and now they're in that identity crisis, where do you think it's going? And what advice would you give to them to help move forward that identity crisis?
Yeah, I would encourage them to really come at it from a different question, and that is, what are we trying to accomplish? And then what is the right environment to accomplish what you're trying to deliver? And I think what's really great is that a lot of organizations realize now that doesn't have to be a 5-day a week in the office type of approach. I don't think that's what employees really are looking for anymore. And I have a son now who's in the workforce working for a major corporation, and it's 2 to 3 days a week in the office and hybrid, and it's part of the culture there. And we were even doing some of that at the NCAA when I was still there, in part because of COVID. I think COVID accelerated these things. I think eventually we would have got to them. And I think COVID really kind of put it on fast forward. But I think it's coming back to what's your business? What is your organization? What are you trying to accomplish? And then what's the right way to do that? And then, for most organizations, your greatest assets are your people.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? They absolutely are. So you have to listen. You have to be mindful of that and think about how can you support them in every sort of way. And I do believe that it's always there's going to be a remote element. Certainly there are some industries where that's not necessarily the case, but I think for most now, I think there's some element of that.
For the knowledge workers, it's here to stay. There's some version, flex work, it's here to stay if you're working there. And so I love it. Thanks for that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Throughout your leadership, you've done a lot of collaborating work with your own organizations as well as others. What have you found are key principles to building really long-term relationships with others in kind of the professional landscape?
Yeah, I'm actually really passionate about this subject, so I appreciate you raising it. It's something that I've just placed a priority on. Really, throughout my career, starting as a journalist, where you have to develop sources.
Yep.
Right.
And you don't get anything done until you develop those relationships. Working in government and at a major university, and now at a national level, you have to work together. And I think really first approaching that and showing people that you care. a quote that I really, really like from St. Thomas Aquinas, who defined love as willing the good of the other.
Yeah.
And I think that is a great place to start when you're trying to work with people and collaborate with them. Show them that you care, that you really are there to learn about what they're working on and how you might be able to then come alongside, help provide a solution. Maybe another way to say that is dig the well before you're thirsty, right? So that you're not in a crisis type of mode. And then you're having to, oh, nice to meet you. Let's figure out this crisis. Instead, you've got the relationship. So at the end of the day, we are really talking about relationships, how to build them, and how to show people that you care.
I love it. I love it. And so tell us, what advice would you give to like a young collegiate athlete in this sphere? Like, how do they go out, start building that professional network, in whatever they're doing?
I think one of the great elements of collegiate athletics is the environment that you're in, right? You've got a built-in network on your team, number one, then with your coaches, then within your athletics department, and then within your campus at large. And what I would tell anyone is you've got to take advantage of all of those situations and be proactive in that. Set up time with your coach. Tell them what you're interested in. Set up time with that professor where you feel like you've connected. Let them know what you're interested in. One of the challenges for student athletes nowadays is because they're so busy between athletics and academics, they might not have chance to have an internship, study abroad. My counsel when I talk to college students about that is, well, you have not because you ask not, right? So lean into that. Have a conversation with somebody, let them know what you're interested in, and then start to look at, is there a potential solution there? Because once you start to do that and take advantage of those networks that are right around you, you just never know what doors might open for you. And so that I think is one of the great parts of higher education is you've got those networks in place and you can take advantage of them.
Yeah. We're going to move into our fire round and just ask a few quick questions surrounding everything we've kind of talked about. Just always want to grab some good practical and applicable pieces of advice from your experience for all of our listeners. So let's begin. Just 3 quick questions. Michael, fire away.
All right. First question. How can college athletes establish and maintain strong relationships with their coaches and their teammates?
Be intentional. Be proactive. Make it a priority. It's critical.
Yeah. Why is effective communication important for college athletes in their careers, both on and even off the field?
I think what more and more people realize now is that effective communications is not a bonus or extra. It is vital to your success. It doesn't matter in what field you're in. It doesn't matter what career you're in. And it starts when you're a student athlete. And if you focus on that and be intentional, it will really, really benefit you for a lifetime.
Yeah.
I love it. Love it. Last question. How can college athletes prepare themselves for a successful career after athletics is done?
Take advantage of those resources that are on your campus. Connect with your coaches. Connect with your fellow teammates. Connect with your professors. Lean into everything that is there on your campus and take advantage of that. It's more than just going to class and going to practice. It's taking advantage of everything that's available to you.
Networking at every level. That's so good. Well, Erik, I want to thank you for joining us today on Framework Leadership. I'm grateful for your insight that you've provided all of our listeners. Just an awesome privilege to have you here.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and if you want to stay up to date with Erik, you can check him out on X at CollSports Erik, CollSports Erik, Erik. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on Framework Leadership Podcast. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Framework Leadership. If you're watching on YouTube right now would be a great time to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you can get more leadership content right into your YouTube feed. You can also check us out on Instagram at Kent_Ingle, at Dr. Michael Steiner, or on Twitter and YouTube at Kent Ingle. And hey, if you love great email newsletters, and I know that I do, you want to check out the Framework Leadership newsletter. Every single Friday drops in great tips to be a better leader, resources, thoughts right into your inbox. Check it out. You can sign up at kentingle.com. Make sure you hop onto there. Thank you so much for listening to Framework Leadership.
Take care, everybody.